So, here's another set of recently previewed Whispers of the Old Gods cards, starting with Infested Tauren. Infested Tauren immediately looks like it has some similarities with Sludge Belcher and Paladin Shredder. Paladin Shredder being a 4-mana 4/3, which Death Rattle summons usually around a 2/2 card. Sludge Belcher, a card that had Taunt, which had a Death Rattle. Infested Tauren has 2 fewer attack to make up for Taunt when compared to Paladin Shredder. It also doesn't have Mech. The good news is Infested Tauren is 1 mana more for Death Rattle summon a 2/2, which means it's way better than Tauren Warrior. The bad news is compared to Paladin Shredder, it gains Taunt for 2 attack, which is terrible, and compared to Sludge Belcher, the Slime doesn't have Taunt, and also the stats are much worse than Sludge Belcher. So basically Infested Tauren is kinda looking fair because you add up the stats and it's a 4 mana 4/5, but you don't really add up Death Rattle that way. Furthermore, the Slime doesn't have Taunt. This is a Death Rattle with a low attack value, which makes it naturally worse. Although it has Taunt, so that's slightly better. Just because of the statistics on this card, the card is not very good in Constructed. In Arena, this card's gonna be like a card that isn't that great to pick, but it isn't bad. It's kind of average-ish. Unexceptional. Stats add up to Yeti, but too slow to be a Yeti. Doom! With an exclamation mark in all caps. Featuring a lovely visage of Yogg-Saron, Doom is the bigger brother of Twisting Nether. Twisting Nether is actually a card that is being run in a very specific card deck right now, Reno Lock. This costs 2 more than Twisting Nether for the same effect, except you draw a card for each you destroy. And paying 2 mana for drawing, say, 2 cards would be a really good deal, especially if you lump it in with Twisting Nether. The idea is generally if you lump cards into 1 card, then the effect is much better. But the main problem is that Warlocks don't really need to draw cards because their hero power is to draw a card. So you could always Twisting Nether into life tap. So that's already destroy all minions, draw 1 card. So Doom, if you're dooming, say, 3 cards, which seems kind of standard, then... And remember, you're drawing cards for yourself, too. So sometimes you have some really bad cards, and they have some really good cards, and you doom, and then you draw 6 cards. Anyways, the point is, it's 10 mana, it's really inflexible. You spend your entire time basically clearing the board, and then your opponent gets to go first. Plus, you can't even Twisting Nether on 8 mana. Twisting Nether is usually best when cast on 8 mana, because that's when you barely can survive after clearing the board. This is just a bit too slow for any amount of Constructed. It's even too slow in Arena. In Arena, Twisting Nether is okay, but it kind of faces the exact same problem. Why do you need Doom in Warlock? You can just Twisting Nether, which is even the same rarity, and then you just life tap. So, in Arena, probably about the same level as Twisting Nether. Anyways, a cute card though. Thanks, Yogg-Saron. We've got a set of 3 forbidden cards revealed as well. Forbidden Flame, the Mage card, spend all your mana, deal that much damage to a minion, so you can spend anywhere between 0 mana to deal 0 damage to minions, or 10 mana to deal 10 damage to minions. Some people looked at this card and wondered, why can't this hit face? And the reason is because it would be a strictly better Pyroblast, which isn't necessarily bad to do, but I think it would be too powerful if it could hit face. A lot of people look at this card and say, man, Frostbolt does 3, Fireball does. Frostbolt is 2 mana and deals 3, Arcane Blast is 1 mana and deals 2, Fireball is 4 mana and deals 6, Pyroblast is 10 mana and deals 10, Flame Lance is 5 mana and deals 8. Why would you need this card? It's so inefficient, but flexibility is actually really good. All the time in Constructed, you Fireball something with 5 health. Or you even Fireball stuff with 4 health. All the time you Frostbolt something with 2 health. And this Forbidden Flame is kind of like a weaker Frostbolt when you need it, a weaker Arcane Blast if you need that, a weaker Fireball, a weaker Pyroblast, but a weaker Flame Lance. But the flexibility is great. I really like the way that this spell is designed. I like the cycle. You don't even have to have these forbidden cards be the only card you play a turn, because you can play a card first, or you can use your hero power first, and then your Forbidden Flame. So it's just really flexible. And with flexibility comes the cost of power, but flexibility is often very good. So I see this card being experimented with in Constructed for sure. And in Arena, this card is going to be quite good. And in specifically Mage, you can even take advantage of cards such as Flamewaker and Mana Worm and use it for 0 mana, and then just affect the board. Very similar to Forbidden Flame, this Priest card allows a lot of flexibility. This has been theorized for a bit previously of a card that was something like spend however much mana you want and then summon a XX minion where X is how much mana you spend. Instead we get this Forbidden Shaping card, which is spend all your mana and summon a random minion that costs that much, which is arguably better. So worth mentioning that if you spend your mana in this way, you are not going to activate Battle Cries. And also worth mentioning that on 0, you are getting in Standard either Wisp or Tiny Fin, and in Wild, you can also get the Dummy. Now, the card is very similar to Unstable Portal from Mage, however, it's less good, and the randomness effect won't really come into play as much because Unstable Portal often gives you a 1 mana discount. And it's in the class which activates off of spells, so Mana Worm and Flamewaker. Priest doesn't have that. Really good card to top deck because you can just play it for 10, although it's worth noting that as of current statistics, it seems that casting this on 8 is better than 10. Because on 8, you get much better minions. If we're talking Standard, you have the chance of getting anything from Tyrion Fordring to Ragnaros to Gromish to Chromagus. A lot of good choices. On 10, there's not really that many as good cards. There are actually very few cards. If you do 10, though, you almost always get like a big guy. Between Varian Rin, a 7/7, and Sea Giant Frost Giant, 8/8s, and Deathwing, a 12/12. On 8, you also get big cards, which are usually around 8/8, but they often have effects as well. And you can always just use your hero power with the Priest, and then you cast the Forbidden Shaping, and then you get good stuff. So yeah, very flexible. This card I actually don't really see getting play, but it'll certainly be experimented with. It's very difficult to evaluate how good a flexible card is until you see it in practice, because based off the stats, like, you can always think, wait, why am I going to take a chance on getting an 8 mana card? I can just put that 8 mana card in the deck. But the thing is, sometimes you don't have a 4-drop and you just play a random 4 mana card, and that's much better than passing. Sometimes you don't have a 3-drop and then you play Forbidden Shaping for a 3 and you get a 3/3 on average, and that's very good. I'm a little bit pessimistic on this card in Constructed, but I'll certainly see some experimentation with. In Arena, where you are really wanting to get a good curve, I expect Forbidden Shaping to be rather good. So, a few questions are, how does this work with Summoning Stone? The answer is quite simple. This card is a 0 mana card, so it'll summon a 0 mana minion. Forbidden Healing, the Paladin Forbidden card, which heals for double the mana you spent. We've seen a lot of pure healing cards in the game so far, between Holy Light 2 mana, heals 6, Healing Touch 3 mana, heal 8, Flash Heal 1 mana, heal 5. Obviously at lower mana cost, Forbidden Healing isn't very good. This is one of those cards which is flexible, but will usually not see the flexibility used. I think you'll usually use this as the endgame huge heal of 10 mana, heal 20, or 9 mana, heal 18, or something like that. We've seen a card that is even a big card that heals, Tree of Life from Druid. It has not really seen play, although in those mill decks it has seen a tiny bit of experimentation. What Forbidden Healing has is, it has the flexibility, good old flexibility of the Forbidden cards. So sometimes you don't actually get to turn 9, and I'm talking about Druid, and you want to cast Tree of Life, but on turn 8 you would die. Well, Forbidden Healing, you can just heal for 16 on that turn. Or you can alternatively play Consecration on turn 8, and then you play Forbidden Healing and you heal for 8. And sometimes that's good enough. Oftentimes, in fact, you just need that little bit of flexibility, that little bit of healing to get you past that face deck. Whereas against a really late game deck, maybe you want to heal for 20. it opens up the possibility for those Healadins to add in like that huge heal at the end, while also having the flexibility to play this card earlier on and to just barely stave off death. This card will see some play if there is a combo Paladin deck that shows up. Worth noting, on a side note, while we're talking about combo Paladin decks, the Anyfin Paladin deck is thought of to be this Paladin combo deck, which requires you to survive a while. However, Murloc Paladin is getting a big hit to it because it turns out that old Murkai is a reward Murloc, which means that it is going to get rotated out. It will not be in standard. That doesn't mean the Murloc Paladin deck is dead. It just means it's a lot less good. You can certainly target minions with this too. Say you have a 3/5 Tauntat. You can cast your spell and then maybe Forbidden Healing on just 1 mana to heal that taunt for 2. That can be very useful. So it can be huge healing, it can be tiny healing, very flexible. We'll see how that pans out for all the Forbidden cards. Tough to evaluate right off the bat, but if I were forced to give ratings, I would say Forbidden Healing not going to get played, Forbidden Flame likely to get played, and Forbidden Shaping not going to get played. But again, really flexible, has the chance to all be played or have none be played. It's going to be interesting. In Arena, healing cards tend to be like way worse because you usually have a plan for when you're healing. So I'm going to say this Forbidden Healing card won't see much play in Arena. Herald Volazj. It's a 6 mana 5/5, which means you better have a good effect. Battlecry, summon a 1/1 copy of each of your other minions. So this is one of those tough cards which requires you to already have minions in play before the card is good. And these cards have traditionally not been very successful in Constructed. For example, even Temple Enforcers, 6 mana 6/6, Battlecry give a minion 3 health, but a big part of the reason why that card isn't good is because you can't really count on having a minion in play. Similar to Herald Volazj. So maybe you combo Herald Volazj. You play the minion that you want to copy, and then you play Herald Volazj. Something that comes into mind is you play Brand Bronzebeard, and then you play Herald Volazj. Your Battlecry goes off twice, so that would mean you get 2 Brand Bronzebeards, which seems bad because all the Brand Bronzebeards only double, but that means you have a higher chance of saving a Brand Bronzebeard until later. Anyways, that's an example of a bad play. There are some really good cards out there with constant effects such as Ragnaros and Ysera, but the big problem is you can't play Ragnaros or Ysera and then play Herald Volazj. Usually that's super win more. First of all, you would need to actually have played the card first, and we lump Sylvanas into there too. You play your Sylvanas or your Wobbling Runts or your Ragnaros or your Ysera or your Cairn, and then the following turn you play Herald Volazj. Cairn is probably the most likely out of all of them, and I'm talking standard here. There's a lot more possibilities for playing wild. For standard also, eventually there might be some cards that are cheaper that have a really strong effect, which you can then play and then play Herald Volazj on the same turn. I'm just going to say Herald from now on, because saying a Z and a J together is ridiculously tough. So that's the main problem with the Herald. You need to have a good card already, and good cards tend to cost a lot of mana, and you can't cost both cards at once, and if your good card has already stayed on the board for a turn, you're usually winning anyway, so you don't need the Herald to win the game more. There's some ideas of playing this in a Murloc deck, but the main problem of playing Herald in a Murloc deck is you're playing a Murloc deck in Priest. In theory, if you play Herald with even just 2 random cards, then you're getting a 6 mana for 5/5 and 2 1/1s, which is kind of average because Boulder Fist Ogre is a 6 mana 6/7. And why not just play Temple Enforcer, in which case you're getting 6/9 worth of stats. Also worth mentioning is that Herald is at its best when you have 3 minions in play because of the 7 minion limit on the board. So at best you can summon a Herald and get 3 1/1s. The things that you want to copy with Herald are just cards with effects and cards with Death Rattle. A lot of Death Rattle cards are getting rotated out, and a lot of cards with good effects cost a lot of mana. So therefore Herald Volazj, I'm going to say, is not playable in Standard Constructed currently. And in Arena, it's typically too slow also, and Frostwolf Warlord is possibly better. Even in Constructed, you might just ask yourself, why not play Frostwolf Warlord instead? And the answer is because it's better to split out one good card and then several 1/1s than just lump it all into one card. But when you compare it to Frostwolf Warlord, you start to see the weakness in Herald. Alright, now let's talk about the 2 further Cthulhu cards that have been revealed. An Ancient Shieldbearer, 7 mana 6/6. If your Cthulhu has been buffed 4 times, or 2 times with 2+2+2s, you gain 10 armor, which is a really simple card. Again, we can't really evaluate how good these cards are until we see all the Cthulhu cards. But needless to say, a 7 mana 6/6 gain 10 armor is a really good card. A 7 mana 6/6 is a really bad card. So if a Warrior Cthulhu deck is good, then you'll put Ancient Shieldbearer in it. If a Warrior Cthulhu card deck is bad, then you won't put Ancient Shieldbearer in it, and you won't run Warrior and Cthulhu decks. We'll see. Cthulhu's Chosen, which is a very basic 4 mana 4/2 Divine Shield, reminds a lot of the 3 mana 3/1 Scarlet Crusader, which has Divine Shield. This card's already just good by default, because a 4 mana 4/2 Divine Shield is a good card. Especially with Shredder out of the game. This is kind of reminiscent of Shredder, right? Shredder is a 4 mana 4/3, and usually you would kill the Shredder in one shot, and then it would come back. Cthulhu's Chosen is kind of like that, because you can't kill it in one shot. I mean, well, you kill it in one shot, and then it comes back as a 4/2, which is better than Shredder. Shredder's average drop. Of course, it is easier to kill the Chosen the first time around, because all you need to deal is 1 damage to it to break the Divine Shield. So, we're not going to say better than Shredder, but we're going to say just as a basic card, pretty good. And furthermore, unlike Scarlet Crusader, you can't kill the second part of Scarlet Crusader with something simple like Fire Blast, or hitting it with a dagger. So this card, I expect to see everywhere if you're playing a Cthulhu deck. It might even be good enough to play if you're not playing a Cthulhu deck. It might be the replacement for Shredder. Or maybe Yeti is the replacement for Shredder, we'll see. A lot of these cards that have to deal with Cthulhu, and with Cthulhu being given as a freebie card with this expansion, has led to the speculation that the Cthulhu deck is kind of going to be a basic good deck, where you just put in a lot of efficient minions and then you finish with Cthulhu at the end. So a good deck for beginners. Which is good because it does look like a simple deck to play. It's good for newer players to have a good basic deck with a good simple basic game plan, and I would encourage that to happen if that is the direction that Blizzard is going for. Just craft a bunch of Cthulhu related cards, put Cthulhu in, have a good time. Maybe it's never a top tier deck, but it's just kind of competitive. Or maybe it does end up being a top tier deck. Obviously, a lot of testing will have been done internally with Blizzard to see whether or not they want the power level of Cthulhu to be like a tier 1 deck. But I personally expect it to be like you can build a good Cthulhu deck and it'll be the very height of a relatively medium-sized hill when there are going to be better decks out there. But maybe at first people like see the hill and then they're like, okay, let's build the best Cthulhu deck possible. We're on top of a hill. For now, since it's the beginning of Standard, this is a really good deck. And then later on, there will be decks that overshadow it because the Cthulhu deck is too fair. Or in short, it's basically Secret Paladin, except less good. Because it's going to be a fair deck. You know, you play your 2 mana 2/3, you play your 3 mana 3/4, you play your 4 mana 4/2 with Divine Shield, your Doctor 2, your Doctor 3, your Doctor 4, you play whatever 5 mana card has interaction with Cthulhu, you play like a generally good 6-drop, and then like on 10 turn you play your Cthulhu, hopefully you've drawn it by then, and then you do a big effect, and then what a fair deck.
Now I've got a tale to tell you of the ones from long ago. There's an evil that's been dreaming, but now it's softly screaming. from the darkness, their power will grow. Their voices are made of poison. When you listen, you are sure to be disturbed. You can lock your doors. You can say your prayers. No creature can resist their wicked words. Never mind, no need to worry. That's all just a story of the whispers of the old.